Greetings, my name is Odin from the Odin's Musings YouTube channel, and I'm here on behalf of auracrystals.com. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do the Even Count Peyote stitch. This is one of the fundamental stitches you learn when beginning beading, and you can use this technique to apply it to a variety of projects. We're going to be learning about the flat technique, which you can use to create bracelets and bands for any of your pieces. But as you understand the stitch and the technique, you can apply it in a wide variety of jewelry applications, including creating 3D structures and pieces such as this. For this project, you will need 2 contrasting colors of Delica beads. I'm using Silverline Turquoise number 149 and Opaque Black number 10. These are both in size 11 seed beads. You can use whichever seed beads you like. I just find that the Delicas, since they're so evenly cut, they're easier to work with, since you won't have to worry about uneven beads and uneven cut beads, and everything fits nicely into place. You will also need a stop bead or a spring ring stopper. You will also need a needle and thread. I'm using a D-weight Nymo, and I'm using a size 12 needle, but you can also use a size 10 if you'd like. Start off by threading on about a yard's worth of thread. You can always add more later. So the first thing we need to do is to thread on our stop bead so that we can keep our beads on our thread while we're working with it. So I'm going to pass that down, leaving about a 6-inch tail so that I have enough room to tie off my ends properly. Now all I'm going to do to secure it in place is to pass back through the bead once more so that the thread is caught in there and it wraps around the bead once. If you have a spring bead stopper, all you do is open it up and slide your thread through one of the gaps and close it shut. Now Even Count Peyote gets its name because there's an even number of beads per row. So in this example, I'm going to put 4 beads per row. Now the first row is much different than the rest of the rows that we're going to work with, and usually with a lot of different beading stitches, the first row is a little bit more difficult than the rest of it. So I'm going to start off by threading on an alternating set of beads of blue and black until I have 4 of each beads. And this is what our starting row is going to look like. In this example, all of our odd number rows are going to be the blue, and all of our even numbers are going to be black. So since we have 2 rows working with at the same time, our next row is going to be row number 3, which is odd, so it's going to be blue. So in order to add on the next row, I'm going to take 1 blue bead, I'm going to skip over the last blue I've added, and pass through the black. And when I pull that tight, I've captured my 2 blue beads here. What I want to do is pull it tight and flip it over so that the 2 beads sit on top of each other. It's very important to keep your thread tension fairly tight to maintain this structure. Now for the next stitch, I'm going to repeat the same thing. I'm going to add 1 blue bead, skip over the next blue bead, then pass through the next black bead. And when I pull that tight, the next bead is sitting right on top, wedged between the gap between the 2 black beads. And I continue on this way, add on 1 more bead, and pass through just the next black bead. Add on 1 more blue bead, and then pass through our final black bead. And this is what our first 3 rows look like. Now we're on row number 4, which is an even row. So we're going to be working with black beads this time. So coming out of the very last black bead, I'm going to add 1, then pass my needle through the next blue bead, skipping over the black. We have 2 black beads on top of each other. And I'm just going to continue in the same way in order to finish this row. So I've added 1 black bead. I'm going to skip over the next black bead and pass through the next blue. Add 1 black, pass through the next blue. Add 1 black, and pass through our final blue. And now I have completed row 4, and I'm back on the blue side starting row 5, so we switch to blue. Coming out of the last blue bead, I add 1 more blue bead, skip over it, and pass through the black. Once more, add a bead, skip a bead, go through the black. Add 1 bead, skip a bead, go through the black. Add one bead, skip a bead, go through the last black. Like so. Now I'm ready to turn around, starting with the black, going through all the blue beads on this row. And that's basically how you do it. You go one direction, turn around, go the other direction, turn around, go the other direction. Now, if you're not too comfortable with going back and forth yet, you can always, since I'm starting on this side, if I just flip it over, I'm starting on my right side again. So then I can just add a black bead, go in the same direction, like so. When I get to the end blue bead, I can just flip it over and I'm back on the right side. So keep going at this back and forth until you have about an inch of length, and then I can show you how to add threads and end your old ones. So once you feel that you're running out of thread, which is about 3 inches or whatever you are feeling uncomfortable working with it, you want to make sure that you finish off a row. This just helps you keep track of where you were in place, so that you don't have to start off in the middle of a row. Keep in mind that we've ended up coming out of the last black bead on this row. All I'm going to do is pass downward through the piece. So I'm just going to keep starting off and going through the next black underneath. And we're going to kind of do a zigzag motion going across the whole piece. So from here I'm going to go up one and down one. I'm going to take my needle and just pass it through the next black above and the blue below. And keep doing that. Going through the next black and the next blue. And finally until we're at the end of the piece. This by itself is reasonably secure, but if you're feeling uncomfortable, you can go back through and pass in the opposite direction. So now I'm just going to go up and pick up the next blue and black and keep going down until I'm back out at the black again, like so. Now be careful when you're doing this with smaller beads. You only have a certain number of passes, and you don't want to fill the beads with too much thread, otherwise you'll have a hard time adding in your thread, and you take the risk that you can snap a bead in the middle of your piece. Once you feel like everything is nice and secure, you can go ahead and clip your excess thread. You can also then remove your stop bead just by pulling it off and end the thread here the same way that you did up here. So once you thread your needle, you'll just pass up through the black that is right on top and keep going through a blue, a black, a blue, a black until you're all the way at the end. So next you'll need to add on your thread. What you can also do when you're ending your previous thread is maneuver it through the bead that you ended up with when you started off, when you finished your last row, so that you can tell where you need to end up. But since I ended my thread here, I know that I need to end my bead up here as well. So I'm going to start off on the opposite end and basically do the same exact thing. I'm going to start a little lower, and I'm going to start my thread up about 4 rows down, and I'm going to work my way up. So from here I'm just going to move through the black bead above. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail so that in case I pull too tight, I don't slip the whole thread out. Then I'm going to keep going upward. And so forth. Just make sure you're making a zigzag motion. Don't try to pass through as many beads as you can with your needle. If you only can do one at a time, just take your time with that, so you don't accidentally snap any threads, any beads, any needles. But then finally, once you get through, you will end up right back where you started from. And I can pull, since I've weaved through so many beads. This doesn't move, my tail is nice and secure. I can go ahead and clip that tail. And now, with my added thread, I'm free to continue on my next row. And in this case, it's going to be a black row. So I'm just going to add on my bead, move through the blue, and continue. And that is about it for the flat, even count peyote. It's a very repetitive stitch, and it's really simple to get into the head space in order to figure out what beads go where. You're basically sandwiching beads in between the little gaps of each seed bead. Feel free to experiment with different shapes and sizes, and create new pieces with different patterns using this technique. And once you feel comfortable, feel free to explore other options using this technique. Thank you for joining me on this lesson. You can find all pertinent materials at auracrystals.com, and you can find all links in the description box down below. If you'd like to check out more of my work, you can find me at Odin's Musings here on YouTube or at odinsbeadhall.com.